I'd like to ask for the story, which I believe exists, of the Newton apple tree. I believe this is the best kept secret in the whole 16 years of the university. I know there's a story, and I'd like to ask Louis to tell it.
Oh, well, the story is, I don't know how well kept a secret it is, but the story is quite an interesting one, I think. I had a friend who worked in the Ministry of Agriculture in Britain, and he told me one day that at the East Malling Apple Research Centre in Kent, there were grafted cuttings, and we've had a little discussion. We don't know whether they're scions or what they are, but let me put it that there were cuttings from the apple tree under which Isaac Newton is supposed to have discovered the law of gravitation. And these cuttings have been grafted onto rootstock and were available. And so I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have one of these at Monash? And so I wrote to the director of the East Malling station, and he said, of course, nothing would give us greater pleasure. Your only problem is to get it into Australia. And so when I got back here, I made contact with the botanical quarantine people, and asked if it was possible to bring one of these little trees in. The answer was no. Well, then there started a tremendous correspondence, and this continued for a long time, until eventually it was, he said, I'm sorry, you just can't bring one of these things in on account of our regulations. So I said, well, too bad. We'll just have to rediscover the law of gravitation ourselves. and the matter rested there for a bit, and then I said, could we bring in a pip? Well, genetically, of course, a pip is not really quite the same, because one doesn't know what the other half of the genes are. But anyway, we got a little envelope full of pips, and I gave them to the gardener, and I said, grow these, and if you don't grow them successfully, you're fired, you see. Well, the poor fellow, he really worked hard, and eventually a little tree grew, but it was a sickly, weedy specimen, and it didn't do very well. Then, about that time, and I've forgotten the year that I'm talking about, we appointed our first professor of botany, and it wasn't long before he established good relations with the people in the plant quarantine section, and in due course, one, or perhaps even more than one, of these trees was permitted to come in, because, he had, I won't say he had influence, but he knew the rules. And these were grown, and eventually one was planted out and is now sitting in a place which I still won't reveal. The reason for not revealing it is because if it were announced, shall we say, in the Herald that such a tree were growing, then our experience here is that everybody would descend on it with secateurs, and in no time it would be just a bare trunk, you see. So I thought we would keep this secret until the tree was so big that it could withstand secateuring by people who wanted to souvenir it. But the tree is growing. I saw it only a few days ago. It looks very healthy. And I've no doubt that in a year or two it'll be possible to have an opening ceremony. And I would like to suggest to my successor the form that the opening ceremony should take. And this is that there should be an apple released by somebody, but that it should go upwards. I think the original tree, it was in a rectory in Lincolnshire somewhere. Can't remember the exact place. But the original tree survived until, it may still survive for all I know, but it certainly survived until quite recently. And cuttings were taken from it and grafted onto rootstock at this apple research station in Kent. And being vegetatively reproduced, of course, it's genetically identical with the tree, and that's the point about the pip.
Well, while we're on this kind of thing, there are a number of other things that Monash has got.
Can I talk about the Epstein bust?
Yes.
One of our benefactors, and I don't think there's a secret, it was Sir Osborne McCutcheon, and ours was the planning architect of our campus, at some point in time said that his family had got a trust and he was the trustee, and he had £500. Would we buy a piece of sculpture? Well, it so happened that I don't know what had reminded me of the bust of Samuel Alexander in Manchester University. But this was a work by Epstein that I'd always admired, and it sat in the Faculty of Arts in Manchester. And I sometimes walked across just to have a look at this, because it really is a wonderful work. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice to have that? So I wrote to my old Vice-Chancellor at Manchester, and I said, is there any possibility of getting a copy of this? Because we have a few pounds in those days, and I think we could perhaps afford it. Well, there was a long silence, and I thought I'd offended him in some way, but not a bit of it. In due course, a letter came back to say that he'd now discovered from Lady Epstein, who was then still alive, and for all I know still is, had been able to find the original plaster from which this bust had been cast, and we could have an original. Well, now, of course, the original of a work of sculpture is a little hard to identify, but I think it's accepted that if, you see, you start, the sculptor works in clay, and then the plaster, and then bronze. And I think it's accepted that if a bronze is poured from the plaster, then it counts as an original. Anyway, we eventually, the story came back that she'd found the original plaster, and then a bit later she found the beard, and we were home and dry. And this was cast in Italy, and eventually came here. Then I did a little bit of skullduggery, because where to put it? About that time we were building the theatre, which is now the Alexander Theatre, and it occurred to me that it would really be quite nice to name the theatre after Alexander, because you will remember, of course, that Samuel Alexander was the first Australian holder of the Order of Merit, right? I think that's accurate.
And I wonder whether I could ask Mrs. Matheson what it's like being the wife of a Vice-Chancellor and keeping various Vice-Chancellorial secrets and all the rest of the things that happen.
I'm sure you could ask her. I'm not sure that you really know where the apple tree is now, do you?
I'm not sure that I do.
Thought you might have.
No.
I have been shown it, but I don't think I could lead you to it. I don't think I've seen it for some time when it was much smaller. And of course I wouldn't if I could.
I wasn't going to ask her.
No. Because that's part of the thing, isn't
But
it?
the bigger question remains, you've played a tremendously important part in the life of Monash over 16 years. And I wonder what are some of your reflections about what your part has been?
Well, I think it's a very interesting job to have to do. It's not at all an easy job, you know, not at all. And if you do it all the time, then I think it's probably a good thing that one doesn't know at the beginning how difficult it's going to be. But this sort of thing is on the way out, you know. This sort of wife's role is, I think, very much on the way out now.
We can, of course, refer to the talk you gave, because that'll be part of the collection.
To the most curious body known as the Boobergs. And that was
I take exception to the word curious.
These owls,
Well,
yes.
But in that, it seemed to me that you were talking not about some of the obvious things like entertaining and so on, but, well, I took it to mean that part of it, that you're a repository of confidence and to some extent perhaps even an originator of. Though you see you at the position of being essentially subordinate and the job is always his and never yours,
Yes.
nonetheless, you know things that you're not supposed to know, perhaps, or you have to pretend you don't know. And you also
indeed, yeah.
perhaps suggest things which eventually appear as Lewis's bright ideas.
Well, that's all right, you see. I think this is very reasonable part of
one of the things you're getting at?
It's a very reasonable part of a consort's role, but things that are suggested and become part of the place in the end are only just little drops in the thing. They're not one's own suggestions, and they never have to be. I mean, they never have to come out as that.
Isn't this where you quote that most quotable sentence from your address to the Vice-Chancellor?
About knowing what I don't.
Yes. You spent, what was it, half your life?
Half my life pretending to know what I don't know, and the other half pretending not to know what I do. Yes, and this is possibly the thing that sums up the whole thing.
This is, in the proper sense of the word, a unique occasion. We shall never again meet in this building to farewell a Foundation Vice-Chancellor who has done such wonderful work over 16 years. You'll be very relieved to know that in these circumstances, I am not going to make a speech. I'm going to hand over to several people who are much better fitted than I am to talk in proper seeming words to you. And I want, first of all, to ask one man who, in the very early years before the university opened, worked so closely, early months before the university opened, worked so closely with the Vice-Chancellor, the Comptroller, Frank Johnson, to say something too.
When I was asked, at very short notice I might say, to accept some responsibility for part of the ceremony this afternoon, I understood it was to start at 4:30. So I made the opening remark that it was going to be the Vice-Chancellor's finest half hour, his last, and his final half hour. But of course it's already gone, the normal hours, gone past the normal hours of the establishment in here, you see, but of course they never meant much to the Vice-Chancellor anyway. But I think it is appropriate that he's spending his last few minutes with the group of people whom I regard as his personal staff. Now, you may feel there's an awful lot of you to be his personal staff, but all of you here, I think, have contributed in some small way to his unique role in the university, which is he's the only person in the whole of the university whose responsibilities are not limited to any particular portion of it. Now, it's very difficult, of course, to assess what he has achieved while he's been holding that post, because it's difficult to really, even for somebody who's been here with him for 16 years, to realise what that amounts to. I think it's not appropriate, of course, that I should be responding to this, because you should have somebody who's a capable, competent and practiced speaker to do this. But I can speak very sincerely. And in those circumstances, I now retire. Thank you very much. But I just wonder whether you realise just how much his achievement represents. It's under his leadership that this place has grown from a staff of 4 when we started in 1960, early February. There was a Vice-Chancellor, myself and 2 secretaries. There's now over 3,000 full-time staff. We managed to spend $141,000 in 1960, and the budget now runs to something like 40 million plus. And it's very rare for any enterprise, I think, to have to be spending 300 times its original annual expenditure within a period of about 16 years. There were no buildings other than the Vice-Chancellor's house, and how his wife tolerated our continual taking over of the accommodation, including children's playrooms. I'm not sure whether we found to go any bed. Oh yes, we did. We had bedrooms to start off with. She had a very difficult time, but as always was very tolerant. But I don't want to dwell on what the achievement has. I'd rather talk in terms, if I may, a little of the man. Concerning his ability, I have to say nothing. First of all, he wouldn't have been chosen by people who knew him from previous experience in the chair in Melbourne University and the deanship without hesitation as the leader and founder of a new university, unless they were convinced that he had all those abilities required to see this project through to fulfillment. He's a man of great abilities, wide versatility, astonishing energy and great personal warmth. I'd like to think that in the years of output that has been devoted to the development of this institution, we have been some help.
A few months ago, a journalist colleague of mine sought the help of the university in producing a Latin motto that they proposed to hoist over the desk of a colleague who was undertaking a most arduous task. I turned, of course, to the Department of Classical Studies, who very quickly produced the tag Felix qui superest, which any classicist will know translates roughly into Charlie Brown language as happiness is survival. So you're one of the great survivors. You've survived some most traumatic experiences here. I think you've created a university in which I'm supremely confident that we stand a better than average chance of surviving even such an event as your own regretted departure. I would like now to ask one of your longest-serving, closest associates to make a small presentation on behalf of us all, Miss Mary McCauley.
The appreciation for having been with you for so many years.
No, thank you.
Doctor, would you please?
Well, it's only my strong sense of discipline and obedience that brings me onto this spot. Because the last time I was on these stairs with a microphone was at a time when there was an awful lot of nonsense going on down below. And I didn't really want to repeat that occasion today. However, here I am, and here is my wife. I, of course, can't say too much. All I want to say is that all of you roundabout have been staunch friends over many years. I think that Frank Johnson and Jim Butchart are probably the two best university administrators in the country. Of course, it would be improper of me to suggest that they're without faults, but I tend to gloss over those in deference to the occasion. But I will remember when my wife and I took up residence in our house. We'd been there about a day, and a little note appeared through the letterbox. This was Frank Johnson reporting for duty. I can't remember the exact words.
8:30 p.m. one evening. We had been out and... right, Frank? Right?
Anyway, that was the beginning of a long collaboration. The first part of it, of course, for about a year we worked together in our house, in the study. And I remember we hadn't been there too long before we were asked to produce our first estimates. They were done with that meticulous accuracy with which you all know Frank Johnson is capable of. There was only one mistake. He forgot to double the final figure. If that had been done, we would have been in perfect harmony with our political masters for at least a year. But I guess fate would have caught up with us after that. Jim Butchart, of course, has had, as he explained, a lot of experience of vice-chancellors and quasi-vice-chancellors in other places. And I think I can say now that he is the person to whom I turn most often for advice on what you might call university strategy. He has an unparalleled knowledge of the relationship between administration and academics and the political world, and I'm deeply grateful to him, as I am to Frank, for friendship and help over many years. Of course, it would be quite invidious to start going through all my colleagues, the buildings branch, the finance branch, and so on. Mary McCauley, of course, has been my friend and secretary for a long time. She has, on the whole, kept me out of trouble. She can usually find the things that I lose, but not invariably. And I regret to have to say that this afternoon she has made her last mistake, so to speak. But we'll come to that in a moment. I would just like to say that Of course, this is a moment of pride and sadness for Audrey and myself. But I'm sure that we leave the university in excellent hands. All of you, led at least for next year and hopefully for much longer by Bill Scott, to whom we give our warmest congratulations and good wishes. Now I come to my embarrassment, which Mary shares. I had intended on this occasion to symbolize the handover of responsibility from myself to Professor Scott by giving him the keys of the office. But unfortunately, I've lost them. And I have in my hand, but I would have you know that this is not just a wooden spoon, it is the wooden spoon. And it was given to me by a little delegation of students from the University of Melbourne in March 1961, when on the occasion when I addressed the first group of Monash students. And a little invasion from Melbourne took place, and it was all in good humor and fun and so on, in the happy days when students were good humored and so on. And they presented me with a wooden spoon, and it's been sitting in my drawer ever since. And I've been tidying up, and so I put a little note on designating the history. And I think I can't do more than close this event by handing it over to Bill Scott, if you like, as the wand of office. But before I do so, may I thank you all for coming here and for sharing in this occasion, for the gift that you've so generously given to me, for the very, very kind things that have been said by Frank and Jim and Mary Potter and Mary Macaulay. It's a proud day and a sad day and a happy day.
Well, I have the wooden spoon, and I nearly slipped down the stairs. But may I say that this party goes on for a little while still, and I hope people will enjoy themselves. I don't know if there should be any formal closing of this occasion, except that I may say again, what a unique occasion it is, and I think perhaps before we leave the place, I hope people have some beer or some wine or something in their glasses. Though it's not that sort of formal occasion, might it not be nice if we just had a toast to Louis and Audrey Matheson, thanking them for what they have done over 16 years at Monash and wishing them well for the future. And I propose their toast to Louis and Audrey Matheson.